RDA Steering Committee, and James Hennelly, who is the Director of RDA Toolkit. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to them. Jamie, Kathy, welcome.
Thank you.
Hello. Kathy is going to start us off, I think.
I guess. So I guess I go and... Oops. There we are. I want to thank all of you for your interest in today's webinar. I'm Kathy Glennan, as Dan said, Chair of the RDA Steering Committee, and my day job is Head of Original and Special Collections Cataloging at the University of Maryland. This is a broad outline of what James Hennelly and I are going to be talking about today. First of all, the stabilization of the English text in the Beta Toolkit, and then an overview of new concepts, old concepts rethought, and a summary of what is the same or similar. And then I get off the hot seat and James will take over from there. So let's dive right into stabilization. What are we talking about here? This is a new phase of the 3R project. It's something that we've been doing for many years now, the RDA Restructure and Redesign project. This new phase was effective April 30th with the rollout of the latest update to the toolkit. The beta site now is no longer under continuous revision, and that means that we will start documenting and publicizing changes again as opposed to doing it as part of a project to rework the toolkit. However, the way we will document and publicize changes will be in a somewhat different form than what you're used to in the original toolkit, and that's partly because we're not going to keep entire snapshots of old versions of the instructions. The English language text now is stable for value vocabularies, element sets, entity and element chapters, guidance and resource chapters. So not just the toolkit, but actually things in the RDA registry. Ultimately, this will serve as a baseline text for the next phase, which has to do with getting the translations done, policy statements written, application profiles developed, and anyone who wants to develop supplementary monographs or other guidance to RDA. The text is now considered stable enough for these people to start doing their work. While it's stable, it is not unchanging. The RSC may still decide to modify RDA in the following categories. Minor editorial changes. You'll be delighted to know that if you report a typo to us, we'll be happy to fix it, and other obvious errors. We will also continue to do edits to improve consistency, and some of those actually come out from the translators who suddenly have a couple of choices about how to translate a word and what did we really mean. So we will continue to make changes like that. We also may consider additional changes if, and this is a big if, they will not have a significant impact on the translators, policy statement writers, and so forth. If we're promising a stable text, it needs to be stable enough for them to move forward with confidence. So the additional changes that we make also need to not affect the outcome of applying the instructions. However, we will continue to add and revise examples, including for the translations that are in progress. And of course, we will be continuing to improve and add to the toolkit interface, and James will talk about that later. I have to emphasize that this phase does not start the promised countdown clock on the original toolkit. This is just a phase. The 3R project is not officially ended at this point. So you will be able to suggest changes now, but depending on what kind of changes you're suggesting, we may or may not be able to act on them. For now, we're still keeping the feedback form available that's been available through the Beta Toolkit site, and we encourage you to continue to use that to report errors and ask questions. We also encourage you, where you have regional representation on the RSC, to work within your regions to identify areas for additions or corrections or expansions. When you're within Europe, that's URIG, North America, that's NARDAC, and Oceania, that's ORDAC. Each one of these regional organizations has presence on the RDA RSC website. And if you're not represented by a region, you should feel free to contact me via my RSC chair email, and we will see what we can do to accommodate your concerns. I also expect to be charging new RSC working groups in the next few months, and these groups will have international representation. If you find that a call comes out and you are interested, I encourage you to apply. But again, the bottom line is that any major changes that don't fall into that previous description of minor changes will have to wait until the beta site becomes the official version of RDA. I'd like to jump in now into what's changed from the original RDA. And first I've grouped this by things that were influenced by the development and publication of the IFLA Library Reference Model, or LRM. First of all, there are more relationships and fewer attributes in the beta toolkit than in the original toolkit. A relationship is a specific association between two RDA entities, and you've commonly called these relationship designators. That's how they were presented originally. However, these are now elements in their own right, and each one of them has its own element page. As does its reciprocal. Because these are inherently reciprocal, those are also elements, and they also have their own element pages. You can see if you mention that Jeff Bezos is the chief executive of Amazon, then inherently Amazon has a chief executive of Jeff Bezos. An attribute is somewhat more limited. It is a characteristic of an RDA entity, and it doesn't have a relationship with another one. So for example, content type or dimensions. They are about the thing you are describing, and they don't have a relationship to any other element. RDA has implemented the new entities from LRM in the beta site, and these are agent. I have to emphasize that this is a person or two or more persons capable of acting as a unit, so it's not just sort of a group of fans or poetry lovers, and they must be real human beings. This is a change from the FRAD model, the functional requirements of authority data. We've also implemented collective agent, which is a higher level than corporate body and family, but encompasses those. RDA has retained the sub-elements of corporate body and sub-entities, of corporate body and family. Nomen, this is one of the stranger things and a little hard to wrap your head around. It associates a combination of signs or symbols, or in other words, an appellation, with an RDA entity. As we well know, identical strings may refer to different entities. Anne O'Connor can be one of many different people. Or one entity may have many nomen. Charles Dickens had a couple of pseudonyms that he used. Place is a given extent of space, although there's a recognition in the model that the boundaries may change over time. And time span is a duration of time, which can be very specific and entirely tiny, or it can be a broad range, so anything from a nanosecond to something like the Bronze Age. There are new concepts coming out of LRM as well. Representative expression elements are characteristics that, according to the model, really live at the expression level, but because they are inherent to the intention of the creator, they can become identified as work attributes. These things include, and this is just a sampling on this slide, original language, intended audience, date, duration, medium of performance. And for one work, different attributes can come from different expressions. There does not have to be a single expression where all of these canonical expression elements come from. So for example, if you're dealing with a colorized film, the color content of the representative expression is monochrome or black and white. Another new concept is manifestation statements. These are transcribed from the manifestation using the unstructured description recording method, and I'll have a separate slide about recording methods later. This is really about how the resource represents itself, and the use of manifestation supports machine transcription derived from digitized inborn digital manifestations. There are 13 subtypes, including one that encompasses both title and responsibility on the manifestation. These really are designed more for data exchange or for some very rudimentary cataloging rather than something that you would craft on your own as a cataloger if you're doing individual records. And therefore, the more traditional individual elements remain in the toolkit, such as title proper, other title information, and statement of responsibility relating to title proper. Another new concept from LRM, and I alluded to this when I mentioned appellation in Nomen, are the appellation elements. This now includes existing elements, such as preferred name, preferred title, and new elements that have been added in the beta site for access point, authorized access point, and variant access point. These now are all elements. There are a total of 96 of these appellation elements in the beta site, and they've undergone review and updating for consistency. Principals were applied to place instructions in the appropriate elements because now we have more granularity. You can see a sample here of what relates to person, an appellation of person, a name, a preferred name, a variant name, an access point, an authorized access point, a variant access point, and an identifier. One of the challenges here was trying to figure out preferred name, for example, is really about getting ready to construct it's not about getting ready to construct an access point. In my case, I've used this example for some of you before. My presentations I give as Kathy Glennan, but my publications I give as Catherine P. Glennan. So if you're going to figure out my preferred name, you're going to have to make a choice about that. But in neither case is my preferred name start with my last name and a comma. That's about building an access point. So we've broken up the instructions to try to clarify what goes where and apply them consistently throughout the toolkit and these appellation elements. What's a little different from LRM, but still somewhat inspired by LRM, is this category called RDA entity. This is an abstract class of key conceptual objects that are of interest for resource discovery. This is the top entity in RDA's model, as opposed to what's the top level in LRM, which is res. This is a little bit narrower. It is that it encompasses all of the RDA entities. However, we've created a related entity of, and then related entity of agent, related entity of nomen, and so forth. This allows for referring from an RDA entity to a model that's outside of RDA. So it points out, and there are no assumptions about what you are pointing out of RDA to. There are also changes because of LRM. I alluded to this. Person now must be a real human being. So unlike in the original toolkit, we don't have that category encompassing fictitious or legendary characters or real non-human entities. And because of the way LRM and RDA are structured, this characteristic of being a real human being has to also apply for agent, collective agent, and family. Now, this doesn't change the fact that we still have represented in our things that we're cataloging fictitious and legendary persons and real non-human entities. So how do we deal with that in the new model? Well, fictitious personages named in manifestation title and responsibility statements are really pseudonyms of a person or a collective agent. And so they can actually be accommodated the way we deal with pseudonyms all the time. The more sticky part was trying to figure out about animals and other non-human performers, because when these are in credits in films or something like that, what are we going to do with them? Well, this is where that non-RDA entity diagram that I just had on the previous slide comes into play. This is how we can accommodate those and not break the model. So what's changed from the original RDA in terms of positioning RDA for linked data? This was one of the goals during the 3R project. We recognize that RDA needs to be used in several different implementation models, but we wanted to make sure it was well positioned for use in linked data. And so some linked data principles and terminology have come into play in the new toolkit. First is the vocabulary encoding scheme. This is really just controlled values for elements. Some are available in RDA on an element page, as well as via the Resources tab. If you drop down and you can click on the established vocabulary encoding schemes that are maintained within RDA. But vocabulary encoding schemes can also come from outside of RDA, such as language codes from an ISO list, or authority control system terms or codes or entries from other standardized lists. A string encoding scheme is somewhat related to that. It's really specifying how to construct a particular string. And any of you who have ever constructed an access point but not created a corresponding authority record, you have actually applied a string encoding scheme that tells you for a personal name to put the surname first and followed by the given name, separating those with a comma and so forth. That is how you construct something, a string encoding scheme. There's a new concept of data provenance, which is, broadly speaking, where the information came from. And this can be whatever information and wherever it came from. It's not limited. It encompasses the sources of information from the original toolkit. A statement like title from cover is actually a data provenance type of statement. It can include information from a reference source. I found when I'm creating a collection of metadata about a particular author, I found in this reference source this author's birth and death dates. And it also can be who created the record, or what we're now thinking of as a metadata work. I've created a bunch of statements about this thing I'm describing. I'm the creator, or my agency is the creator. Some of that we do already right now in the North American LC-NACO authority file. Our library agency symbols are added to the 040 in MARC, saying that we have responsibility for the latest version of that content. So it's not quite as foreign as it sounds. Another new concept is adding and being explicit in the toolkit about domain and range. This is available under the element reference button that all of the element pages have. If you just click on that little eye icon, you will get a opening of that entire display. And included in that are the domain, which is the entity that is described by an element, and the range, the entity that's the value of a relationship element. So date of capture, the domain is expression, and the range is time span. And as we mentioned before, attributes are not the same as relationships. They're characteristics, and therefore they don't have a range. So carrier type is only about manifestation. There's nothing else for it to relate to. Other changes of note that I thought you might want to know about from what you've been used to in RDA. Well, there's some new concepts of diachronic works. These are works that are issued over time, and they can be monographs, serials like Le Monde, or integrating resources. And they include aggregates, compilations, multi-part monographs issued over time, and single works. So this example of Homer the Iliad in Greek, Latin, and English is an aggregate. The Green Mile by Stephen King, as originally published, is a multi-part monograph issued over time. It was issued over a several-month period in 1996 originally. These are all examples of diachronic works. There's also a new concept of alternative labels. These are also available under element reference for each element. And these include verbalized terms, which I find especially helpful in understanding the direction of relationship elements. The element name is employer. The alternative label is has employer. And this helps me not get the relationship exactly backwards, which some of you have worked with me to help me understand which way I'm really going at various times. So I'm grateful for that. Another thing that's there are retired labels from the original toolkit where they're applicable. For example, earlier title proper and later title proper are not elements in their own right anymore. They're actually just different types of title proper that are associated with a particular point in time. They're here as alternate labels, so when you search that phrase, you will end up with the right element, title proper. And if you can't figure out why you ended up with it, open element reference and see what you find. There's also a new concept here of condition and option boxes, which replace the original toolkit's 4 different approaches to provide some sort of alternative or expansion on the instruction: optional addition, optional omission, exception, and alternative. These apply when the instruction has at least one condition, and the option is to actually apply the instruction. The same set of conditions may lead to different options, and I'll be showing you some screenshots from the data site so that you can see what I'm talking about. The first is a single condition and option. This is from Authorized Access Point for Work, and the condition is a work is created by an unknown or unnamed agent. And the option is to record a value that is based on the preferred title for the work. And you can see in this option box, we have an example that if I were live, I could open that and see an actual example from the examples editor about how to apply this or how it would work in a particular situation. The second is a single condition with multiple options. So this is the name of person in more than one language. My condition is a value of a name appears in more than one language in manifestations. My first option is to record a value that's in the language that appears most frequently in manifestations. My second option is to record a value that appears most frequently in reference sources in a language that my agency prefers. So in most cases, you're going to be applying one or the other of these options, but not both. And this is where policy statements or application profiles come into play. You might use catalog or judgment. You might have an application profile or policy statement to help you figure out what to do. You can have multiple conditions with a single option. Everything in the condition box is ANDed together, not ORed. So both of these conditions have to apply before this option can be applied. So if I have a date of work after 1500 and the title proper of manifestations that embody expressions in an original language of the work appear frequently in sources of information, then I record a value of manifestation in an original language. So although the if-then language is not set up explicitly in the beta site, that's how these really work together. This makes it more of a almost a more machine-friendly way of doing it. It's not language dependent in the same way that the if, then, and, or set up in the original toolkit. And finally, you can even find yourself in a situation with multiple conditions and multiple options. Here's names of family consisting of a given name or word or phrase. So there are two conditions. The name of the family consists of a value of person, given name, and a value of a name appears in more than one language in manifestations. My first option is to record a value that appears most frequently in reference sources in a language that's preferred by my agency. And another one is, in case of doubt, record a value in a native or adopted language of the person or the Latin form. So again, this may be something that your cataloging agency or your region, however you're deciding to get guidance about how to apply RDA, may have an application profile or policy statement addressing this, or perhaps they just trust you to make the right decision, cataloger's judgment. We can also have options with no conditions. So from title proper, there are two options for recording an unstructured description. One is to record a value of manifestation, title of manifestation, basically transcribe the title. The second option is to essentially to make a note if you feel that there's a need to do so. So record a manifestation note on manifestation on the source or basis for the value of a title proper. There are some enhanced concepts. So you're somewhat familiar with these, but we've taken them a little further. The first is transcription guidelines. One of them is take what you see, which is very literal. And then there's modified transcription, which is essentially what catalogers do now when they're creating catalog records, adjusting capitalization, adding diacritics, and so forth. The choice is going to be up to the cataloging agency, and it may depend on the source of cataloging. If you're ingesting vendor data, you're almost certainly just going to say, well, that's basic transcription, the take what you see. I'm not going to manipulate things. If things come in all caps because that's what's on the title, that's fine. But original catalogers are still very likely to do the modified transcription. Both are valid. Neither version of transcription should prevent our end users from being able to identify and select the resource that they're looking for. Another enhanced concept is aggregates. This is a new approach grounded in LRM. There are three types. There's a collection aggregate, such as a collection of short stories, an augmentation aggregate, which is pretty much everything you see as a monograph, which is a book with a preface, an index, illustrations, anything else that goes beyond the text that the author wrote. And then there's a parallel aggregate, such as that Iliad example we saw earlier, in the original Greek plus Latin plus English. There will be another separate webinar specifically about aggregates, and so I won't go into more detail today. As I mentioned, there are 4 recording methods. There are 4 different means of capturing data. They are not mutually exclusive, and this represents what was already in RDA in the original version of the toolkit in part. It's just been applied consistently through the element pages now in the beta site. There's an unstructured description, which includes transcribed information and notes from the cataloger. There's a structured description, which includes access points and controlled vocabulary terms. There are identifiers that are not actionable, such as ISBN and ISNI. And then there are IRIs, which are used for linked data implementations. These are essentially actionable identifiers that are globally unique. The choice among these is also an option in many cases. And as I've mentioned before, with those options comes the cataloger interest in an application profile, policy statements, and or best practices to help choose, unless you always want to use cataloger judgments. Recently, the RSC decided to implement what we called the agent breakout. Now we have separate elements for relationships that apply to all types of agents. These are explicitly declared rather than what we initially hoped we could rely on the hierarchy from agent down to collective agent and then say person and family, corporate body and family. The problem was that if you looked for a single relationship, say I know I have an individual person as an author without the agent breakout, and I went looking under author, for under person in the relationship matrix, I wasn't finding it because it only lived at the agent level. So instead, we've declared these explicitly. So for something like editor of text, we now have editor agent of text, editor collective agent of text, editor corporate body of text, editor family of text, and editor person of text. I grant you, some of these element names are odd or awkward. They are clear, but they're not necessarily what we want to display out to our users. And I want to emphasize that you do not have to do that. So for all of these on this slide, you could decide to display as all of these as editor of text rather than editor agent, editor collective agent, and so forth. That's something you can manage in your application profile. And definitely you're going to want to work with your vendors about the capability of doing that. So in terms of what's changed, we've also left some old concepts behind. First and foremost, as I'm sure many of you know, is instruction numbers. The way we've created element pages, they simply did not make sense to do that. But we recognize that there are reasons to want to have some sort of shorthand to refer to some particular parts of the toolkit in the beta site. So we are going to implement citation numbering instead. This is truly designed for use with print materials and other non-digital communications. The links that are available to you through the pop-up button that you actually see the screenshot on this slide, that little chain link is a much better way to refer to a precise part of the RDA text if you are corresponding in any kind of electronic form. People can click on that and get exactly to where they need to be. But as I said, we recognize that this is not always how all of us work. So the citation numbering will actually be in the format that you see here, 2 numbers separated by a period for a total of 8 numbers. The numbers will be random, permanent, and searchable. So if you're looking in a single element page, say name of person, there will not be a unique 2-number element citation for everything on that page. It's going to be totally random. It's all about being able to reference the text, not to have number predictability. The RSC issued a white paper explanation about this earlier. One of the biggest challenges in the numbering in the original toolkit was trying to keep it current. And the numbers will be accessible from the pop-up toolbar. They're not there yet, but there will be a new thing added to that 3-element pop-up bar, so you would actually be able to view the numbers. Another thing that's missing is a PDF of the index. This is not sustainable with a new toolkit. So you're going to need to rely on searching functions to get to where you need to go. And finally, actionable links between AACR2 and RDA. AACR2 is now up on the beta site, but too much has changed between AACR2, the original toolkit, and the beta site to maintain those links. You will be able to get to AACR2. That may still direct you to where you want to go in RDA, but you're going to need to use more traditional searching methods. There will not be hot links mapping between one and the other. So with all that change, what's the same or similar? Many of the instructions are actually similar, especially when you start delving into the meaning of the word. Some of the wording has changed, but a lot of the outcomes are the same. This is because there was a commitment by the RDA Steering Committee that the 3R restructuring process would have minimal impact on current practice wherever possible. So, of course, we did have to make some changes in limiting person to real human beings, but for the most part, there are ways for you to keep doing what you have been doing. The outcome of applying the instructions should be similar even if the wording is slightly changed. And right now we have what we're calling soft deprecated elements. All of the details of elements in the original toolkit, such as details of file type, are present in the beta toolkit. But when you go to that page, it makes it clear that it's better to record this as an unstructured description of file type or whatever else your details of element was. Now, why is that? It's because we've made all these recording methods explicit, and there really is technically no difference between a details of file type instruction in the original toolkit and an unstructured description of file type in the new toolkit. Over time, we anticipate pulling out these soft deprecated elements and making them hard deprecated. But in terms of easing your transition into using the new RDA, we wanted to make those available to you. I will note that with more options about how to record data, you can keep recording data the same way, but you can also try something different that works better for your users or in a new environment that you're working in. So I wanted to show you a few things that were similar. In the original toolkit, this if-then for parallel title proper says if an original title is in a language different from that of a title proper, and the title is presented as an equivalent to a title proper, then record it as a title proper. For the most part, this instruction is unchanged, but now there are two conditions, just as there were in the original toolkit. An original title is in a language different than that of a title proper, and an original title is presented as an equivalent parallel title proper. The option is the then clause. Record the original title as the parallel title proper. A little bit different wording, same outcome. For names as titles, this is an excerpt to show you how some things are similar and how they are different. Names of agents under recording titles. If a title consists solely of the name of an agent, record the name as the title. That really is an if-then statement that isn't presented as such in the original toolkit. Now this is clearer in the beta site. Under titles consisting of a name of an agent from title of manifestation, you have the condition clearly labeled. A value of the manifestation title and responsibility statement consists only of the name of an agent. And then you have the clear option, record the name as the title. Some glossary definitions that are similar, but a little different. In the original toolkit, date of birth was a year a person was born, and then included a scope note that said the date of birth may also include the month or month and day of the person's birth. In the beta toolkit, it's the same name, but the definition has changed, a time span during which a person was born. And remember, I told you a time span could be a nanosecond, so don't freak out over the beginning and ending kind of concept for a date of birth. The inverse is explicitly declared in this case. And in the original toolkit, form of work, a class or genre to which a work belongs, the terminology has changed to category of work. And yet, it's very clearly still the same thing. It's a type to which a work belongs, includes a class or genre. And you get the glossary used for form of work. So if you come into the toolkit knowing the old label, you will be directed to the new element for this category of work. The MARC mappings are somewhat different, and we do know they are not complete at this time. In the original toolkit, you had a separate page, a couple of different tables. So for the MARC mapping for the 337 field, you would get for media type, you would get the display you see in the top half of the slide. Now, in the beta toolkit, you can search 337 in the search box and get back to media type here. And that information, that mapping, is in that famous element reference box that if you click on the eyeball, you get to see. And you can see I've given you an excerpt that it maps MARC 21, bibliographic 337, and subfield A and subfield B to this. So that's how the MARC mappings work now, and they will continue to be developed and updated. For more information, I strongly encourage you to visit these following websites. The RDA Steering Committee website as a whole, as I mentioned, the individual regions have pages off of this website. There's also a presentations page from 2019 and earlier as well. Most of our current presentations of interest are there or will soon be there. There's also a 3R Project Frequently Asked Questions site. The RDA Toolkit has its own website where you can get information about what's going on from the publisher's perspective, and it includes 3R project updates. Of course, there's the Beta Toolkit site, and just a reminder that you have to have a login to the original toolkit or otherwise make arrangements with ALA Publishing to have access on a trial basis. And finally, there's an RDA YouTube channel, and presentations such as this one will be sent to you, but I also anticipate that they will be available on that YouTube website as we move forward. So I'll pass this on to Jamie now.
Okay, I hope everyone can hear me. Hello, I'm James Hennelly. I'm Director of RDA Toolkit, and I'm going to kind of pick up where Kathy has left off. Typically, I do a demo at this point. I usually do a live demo, but I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to kind of focus on what changes we've made in the April 30th release and what's coming up soon, and then also talk about our plans for further down the road with the continuation of the 3R project. So I wanted to start off by just encouraging folks to subscribe to the RDA Toolkit YouTube channel, where we have already posted some videos that kind of get into a little more detail about certain aspects of this. And I also want to encourage you to subscribe so you can come back to it, because we will be adding updated material. I'll actually live demo the site on these recordings, certain aspects of it as they come up. Certainly new developments as they come up, I'll add demos there, and we'll of course add some more presentations, etc., that folks are doing about 3R and these change and the beta site will be added there as well. So check out that YouTube site. So we had an April 30th release. Kathy already talked about the stabilization. I'm not going to really add anything to that. There were some fixes to existing features related, most of them related to search in the HTML editor, but a couple other different things. I'll go over all of these. Addition of new features, and we had a few. We have several new features that we really wanted to have up for the April 30th, but the timing didn't work out. We had some shifting of resources in the last month, etc. So they have been pushed back, and they'll be part of a May follow-up. So I'll also talk about what that May follow-up is going to be. So into this improved search. So this is kind of how search currently works on the toolkit. So current search does not support Boolean terms. Rather, it assumes an AND relationship between any search terms you put in. The reason for this was we were finding some difficulties with changes to searching on certain specific terms, phrases in the catalog, etc., like that, and we wanted to make them available to people without having to necessarily use the phrase approach. You can use phrases. You can use quotation marks around your search, and it'll search that entire phrase together. You can use the asterisk for the wildcard in the toolkit. We also support search on instruction numbers in the beta site. So you can search on the instruction numbers from the original toolkit site and get some results on the in the beta site. I would warn you that that kind of that's the metadata behind that is all entered manually, so it is somewhat limited. So if you go search for something that's maybe 4 digits deep or 3 digits deep, you know, X point X point X or something like that, and if you don't get anything, I would recommend that you kind of back off and do a X point X search or something like that, and you're likely to have a little more success. Other changes we've made to search, we've added highlighting. So on the left there, you can see a sample of a search results page, and you can see the search terms are highlighted in the search results. But then you can also click on through to the page, and you can see your search terms are still highlighted when you click from the search results page into the new page. And if you're satisfied with where you're at and you don't want to see the highlighted terms anymore, you can just click the far right breadcrumb above the title there, and that'll remove all the highlights. We've corrected, one of the fixes is we corrected the filtering on search results. So here you can see you have the search results, but I filtered them for glossary. I checked glossary, the default all display on the searches has gone off, and you can just see the glossary entries now. So that was fixed. We made a bunch of improvements to the HTML editor, and with the stabilized text now, you can feel comfortable to go in and start creating some documents if you like in the beta site. We basically added as many of the macros as we could. So it's a pretty extensive toolbar up there at the top to work with. We also added a source view. So if you are comfortable working in HTML, you can switch to a source view and edit the HTML directly. This is an HTML editor, just to be clear. If you copy and paste your Word document into it, it won't necessarily format exactly like you thought it was going to, and you may have to do some tweaking, etc. on that. We're still also making a few little improvements on this HTML editor site. We've gotten a lot of feedback from one of our heavy users of this tool, so we're making some further adjustments as well. So one of the things we've added is this breadcrumb navigation. Right now it's a very simple navigation, rarely gets beyond the entity and element. If you get into the guidance chapters, it might go a few levels deeper. The breadcrumbs, of course, are meant to provide more context for the instructions and to add a little bit of more of a navigation tool to it. Breadcrumbs are all linked. The breadcrumbs were added. One, we needed to add them for guidance chapters and resource chapters too. You'll see them in there. But mostly it's because we had an issue with the visual browser that we had planned. And this is a source of disappointment for us, that we've had to put the planned visual browser kind of on hold and take it off the to-do list for 3R. The reason for this is when we originally envisioned the visual browser as part of the 3R project, we did not expect to have the level of the high number of elements that we have right now. And we haven't really looked, we need to look at the structure a little more deeply to figure out how this works as a visual component. Right now, it doesn't. We did we have pursued this. We actually did a mock-up of a visual browser. And what we came up with was not very visual. It was more text. And we need to think about a little harder about how we display the structure of RDA to the end user in a way that is more edifying, because that's one of the goals of this visual browser, was that it's meant to instruct people about this, how the RDA elements and entities relate to each other, how they're built, how they're constructed, etc. And so we want that to be revealed and clarified by this visual browser. And then, of course, it's a navigation tool that's important. That's an important part of this. So again, it's been kind of a disappointment that this just isn't kind of working out right now. We need to kind of go back to the drawing board, as they say, and think about this again. The cost of this visual browser with the kind of structure we had been thinking of before was extremely high, and we want to be sure that, we're if we're going to spend a lot of money, we're going to get something out of it that's really a benefit to the end user. So we had to back off of that and come back, and we want to come back to it. So the breadcrumb navigation is an alternative to this lack of a visual browser for now. It's not a long-term alternative. We are going to continue exploring a better approach to meeting these original goals of navigation and education for the beta site. And that exploration may bring us back to the visual browser approach in a different way, or it may mean expanding and enriching the breadcrumbs to make them more useful, and it may mean kind of a combination of both, because I think the breadcrumbs will ultimately be an important part of at least like guidance chapter navigation, etc. And the visual browser has always been kind of intended to address entity and element navigation. So these all tie into the relationship matrix as well that you find on the site. And there are issues with the relationship matrix as well, and the solution that we currently have on the site is not a good one, and it's not one that we're able to easily update. So these are all kind of a crucial technical problem that we are dealing with now, and really is taking up a major focus of our attention in these next few months to try and figure out a better solution for these things. I added what I call some a data document, or a little data document at the bottom of each page. And these are meant to give people just a quick give people a citable URL for each page, and then also provide a date for when this was last updated. So the document date that you see at the bottom, and this is something we had in the original toolkit, was this kind of statement. The document date at the bottom reflects when this page was last updated. Now, we will only change that document date if the update is a reported change. And I just want to be clear about this. So a reported change would be if we added new examples, or if we added a new option or condition option, or if we reworded an entire instruction. Some significant change, or changed a definition. Those would all be reported. They would be reported out to you in release notes. So that date would change. If I went in and I fixed a broken link on the page, or I corrected a typo, if there's extra space or something like that, that would not be a reported change, and I would not change that document date. So you would not know that that page changed, but I would know it changed. So anyway, that's what that date means. And this is going to be important in our documentation going forward, because if you come to a page and you say, oh, I don't remember it reading that way, you need to go look at that document date and say, oh, this is when it changed, so I'm going to go back and find the release notes for that date and the PDFs that are archived from before that date, so I can compare and see exactly what changed and what happened. The document URL there is very long. It's reflective of the direction of the work we were doing in development, et cetera, like that. And in the May follow-up, we're going to try and clean up that URL a bit and shorten it up and make it a little more digestible for folks. I should also make clear that this document URL at the bottom does not replace the ability to highlight anywhere in the text and get a URL for linking purposes. That tool, that pop-up tool that allows you to create a link is still there. And of course, it allows you to go to specific points within the page, to link to specific points within the page. Kathy already mentioned AACR2 has been added to the site. It's linked at the bottom of the Resources tab. You'll see it says AACR2. It does require a toolkit subscription to access it. The display of AACR2 includes an expandable, collapsible browse structure. It does not have a search feature. It includes cross-reference links within AACR2. It does not include any links to RDA. And there are no expected updates or enhancements to this site, this RDA AACR2 display. So if there's really an egregious problem, do let me know, but you know, it's not something that we're going to be developing or looking to put too much resources into. So the May follow-up. The May follow-up will likely occur on May 22nd. It will include these 4 significant developments. Citation numbering will be added. We'll add print PDFs. A new admin site will go up, and we'll add a help guide. I'm going to go into a little more detail on all of these things. So Kathy's already talked about the citation numbering and how it will be searchable, and you'll be able to access it through the pop-up bar to get the number, et cetera, like that. I just wanted to add a couple more things. So we're adding citation numbering in entity and element pages, in guidance pages, and related resources, which is the middle section of that resources tab. So these are kind of traditional RDA instruction areas. You know, we're not going to add citation numbering to the glossary or the vocabulary encoding schemes and stuff like that. There will be numbers. So the numbers aren't just to the top of those pages. The citation numbers are obviously to discrete sections of the text on each page. And the basic approach that we've taken for this initial numbering of the text is to put numbers in at all points where there are headers, and also to put citation numbers for all condition statements and all option statements. The only exceptions to these with the headers are definition and scope, element reference, and related elements. And those are all sections that are auto-generated by our script that updates the toolkit with information from the RDA registry. So we do not feel that that is an appropriate place to put in citation numbers. If you find that the citation numbers aren't granular enough in an area you think where they should be, you know, that's perfectly fine comment to submit to us. You can say just the general, I think there need to be more citation numbers, you know, granular to every paragraph. If that's your thought, we'll take that under advisement. But if you think there's a specific passage that is particularly important that merits a citation number, you can also tell us that. And we can, it's not difficult for us to go in and add a citation number to a specific passage or something like that if it's not currently, it's not covered by what we roll out and there's strong feeling that it needs to be. Print PDFs will be added of each page. So this will work much like it does in the original toolkit. You click on the print icon if you're on a page, and it'll open up a PDF that you can either print off or download. The PDF will be only of the page you're viewing. So in the original toolkit, when you clicked on the print, you got the whole chapter that was associated with it, the entirety of the chapter. In this case, if you're on the carrier type page, you're just going to get the carrier type file when you click the PDF, click print for the PDF. And that'll be true of guidance chapters. If you're in a guidance chapter and the page you're looking at, that's the PDF you're going to get. You won't get anything more than that. I think I should bring up at this point just our general plan for print. All the print RDA, as we've done it in the past, is not feasible with the current toolkit. It's not the same sort of resource, and it would be much too big for a print volume. So we are trying to take a different approach where we will offer a range of print resources that we think kind of effectively substitute and meet the needs of catalogers who prefer to rely on print. So we will have the entire print glossary, hopefully later this year that will be out. We will update RDA Essentials, hopefully in the next year. And we're also thinking we'll develop a new product called a Book of Examples. I call it the Big Book of Examples. This is in development, but we will try and pull together examples and organize them in a way that we think will be really instructive and helpful to our users. So that's kind of the plan that we're working towards with that. Next up, the admin site and help. So it's going to be a completely new admin site. It'll have a different look and feel than the old one. I don't know how many of you actually use the old one, but we hope this will be a little more accessible, and it's going to have more things that you can do with the admin site. You can still get the reports that were available from the original admin site, but we'll be also adding a couple new features, including the ability to manage staff profiles. So if you have staff that's created a bunch of profiles, or you've had staff that created a profile and then has left, you can go in and you can delete those profiles that you don't need anymore. And you can use that management tool to also kind of set who can have access to the HTML editor and work on documents, etc., like that. We're also going to add the ability to create institutional views. And that means that that's kind of setting preferences for your staff. So you can set an institutional view, which means when your staff comes into the toolkit and they're logged in, they will see the policy statement documents that you want them to see. They will see the examples or that you want them to see, et cetera, like that. Any of the things that you can set in a view preference menu, you can set for your staff and have that kind of control. You'll also be able to turn off certain things you don't want your staff to use. If you don't want them locally sharing bookmarks or notes, you can turn that function off so that everything's just kept private. So those kind of things will be added to the admin site. The help guide will be coming. It will cover, it's my intention that it will cover all the features and functionality through that May follow-up release. So it'll have comments on how to use the admin site, the new admin site, on how citation numbers work, et cetera, et cetera. And then I also just, again, I'm going to plug the YouTube channel. I'll do little YouTube videos demoing all these new things, and they may follow up on the YouTube channel, so you can check them out there. How am I doing for time? I need to get moving. Accessibility. So accessibility remains a really core component of what we are trying to do with the 3R project. We've taken significant steps towards meeting the WCAG AA standard. Keyboard accessibility has been implemented. Screen reader accessibility has been partially implemented, but we've got more work to do there. After the May follow-up release, we have signed a contract with a firm that will do a full evaluation of the site to test its compliance with the AA standard from WCAG, and they will give us recommendations for remediation on that, and we will do our best to meet all those recommendations. So full compliance with AA WCAG standards remains our goal. So that hasn't changed, and we are still working on it. So one of the things, this webinar is the start of what we call the orientation project, or at least what I call it. It's going to be a series of webinars, online courses, toolkit demonstrations, the YouTube channel, of course, other resources posted online and made available to people. Hopefully we get all these things translated to and made available to people in their different, their preferred languages, etc., like that. But we know that there's a lot of demand out there for further explanation and assistance in understanding the new beta site and changes to RDA, and we are going to do our best to facilitate that. After the May release, I will do a full live demo of the entire toolkit site. It will be a free webinar, and we'll probably have those once every 2 months for the next year or so. So we'll continue to offer free live demos of the toolkit, how to use the beta site toolkit. Following that, we're going to have a series of what I call online orientations. They are going to be offered, I should say, these are the goals of the orientation project. I've talked about this in some other venues before. We want to ensure that everyone's comfortable with navigation features of the redesigned toolkit, introduce users to core concepts, including those changes related to the library reference model. And we also have heard a lot of feedback from LIS instructors, and we want to make sure that we can facilitate or meet their needs for teaching with the toolkit and teaching RDA, and also, address needs of trainers as they go out and try and train people on this themselves. So one of the next step we're going to do is these online orientations, and these include 2 series that will run in July and August, and an LIS-focused one event in later August. The first series is we're calling New Concepts. It's listed here. This will be offered through ALA e-learning or e-resources. I always get confused by their names. Sorry, Dan. These will be 60 to 90-minute webinars delivered by, I think we have a really nice range of presenters involved. Bob Maxwell, Bill Walker, might be familiar names to some of you, Amanda Sprokai, etc. And these will help kind of take a deeper dive into all of these topics that you see listed here and offer you some more insight into what's going on here and hopefully address more of the questions that you have. What these will do, what we see these webinars doing is kind of introducing you to what these concepts are, where they came from, how they're being dealt with in RDA, and then at the end also provide you some kind of practical examples of how to apply these concepts. The other series, special topic series, we'll get into application profiles. I know there's a lot of questions and concerns about that. And some of these topics and online orientations, as we see how people react to them, will also develop into full-blown e-courses that we hope will go into even greater depth and give people some real kind of practical workshop type experience with dealing with these topics and new approaches, etc. And then finally, in mid-August, there'll be a Teaching RDA After 3R webinar led by Brian Dobreski of, I think he's currently at Syracuse, who will give us kind of a template for how we can start thinking about teaching RDA in this new environment and what are some approaches to take. And I really hope that this might lead to an e-course. I hope it leads to discussion and exchange of ideas about how we can kind of put together different approaches to teaching this and training on the new toolkit, et cetera, that we can farm out to everyone after that. And all these online orientations will be recorded and they'll be made available to folks in a variety of different ways. So coming soon, the next major release to the toolkit will probably be in August. It'll include release notes because we are in that stabilized the text. So if we come back in August and we've made changes to the text, they will be reported out to the public. I hope to add some sample policy statements during that time. So with this stabilization, as Kathy mentioned, this is now when policy statements start getting to work. I don't expect these sample policy statements to be real policy statements, but they will reflect how policy statements will function and operate in the toolkit. So at least you can kind of start getting a better sense of that. You know, wishful thinking that maybe we'd pop up a translation in that time frame. That's very wishful thinking on my part, although I do feel the translation process will have its bumps, but it won't be as difficult because of the way we structured things. Hopefully it won't be as challenging a process as it has been in the past on the original site. And I think policy statements will take longer to write because there's a lot of work to do. And of course, we will continue to evaluate feedback that we get from users. So the submit feedback button remains up. Please use it. We do take that information and we've incorporated it already. A lot of the things you see on the new toolkit and changes we made in April, et cetera, are the result of feedback we've gotten from users. So if you have constructive and specific feedback for us, you know, we will take it under consideration. And, you know, it might be something we act on right away. It might be something that takes us a while to get to. But we do read it all, and we kind of triage it and put it into different barrels of work that we will address when we can. So. And finally, just to repeat also what Kathy said, the beta site development continues. The site is not officially sanctioned for cataloging. We've had a lot of discussions within the RDA administrative structure about determining what is a suitable toolkit for official use, a suitable new toolkit for official use, and how to evaluate that. And we'll be sharing more of that information with you as it comes. But do know that our minimum expectations are that all the translations on the original toolkit will be ready or close to ready before we even start considering flipping the switch on the new site. And also we expect policy statements, a significant amount of policy statements to be published and ready on the site before we flip the switch as well. So that that evaluation will be ongoing in the next 9 months or more. And any decision to flip the beta site to the official site would come only after full approval by the the RDA Steering Committee, the RDA Board, and an announcement to the public that it was imminent. So stay tuned on all of that stuff. I think that is all I have. So we are open for questions now.
All right, Jamie and Kathy, we're going to unmute you both since we're not exactly sure who these questions, some might be for one of you, some might be for both of you, but we've got a ton of questions, so we're just going to run through them and get to as many as we can. First question, what exactly does RDA translation mean?
RDA translation?
That is the question.
Oh. I'm not sure I understand the question, but I mean, RDA translation is a translation of RDA. It's a translation of the instructions of RDA, the contents that you would find under the entities and guidance tabs in the beta site, as well as the middle portion of the resources tab. That means you've translated all of that into a different language. There are different levels of translation. Some people do what we call a partial translation or reference translation, which means they just translate the information that's on the registry, which is effectively the glossary, if you will, of RDA. We have different arrangements with different language communities.
Well, in the interest of getting to as many questions as possible, why don't we wait and see if we get a clarification on that, and if we do, I'll let you know.
Okay.
And I'll move on to some of the other questions. Is an aggregate work necessarily diachronic?
I'm going to let Kathy take that one.
Kathy, are you still with us?
I was afraid of that.
There you are.
Oh, good.
Yep, we can hear you, Kathy. Kathy, I'm sorry, you're really, really quiet. Is it possible to move the microphone closer?
I don't think so. Is that any better?
There we go.
All right.
I
will hold it. I will practically swallow it for all of you. No, I think that was answered in the chat that aggregate works can be static, a single issue, such as a compact disc with multiple musical recordings on it. That is an aggregate, but it is not diachronic.
Okay. Moving on. Oops. Sorry if that one was answered in the chat already. We're trying to follow along. There's been a lot. Yeah. I'm concerned that synchronic and diachronic may be examples of the original RDA propensity towards inaccessible language. Are we starting to see more plain language description of rules in this iteration?
Diachronic was introduced as a term to label a brand new concept. I do not believe synchronic is used in RDA at all. The inverse of diachronic is static, and we are attempting to do our best to keep plain language. I know not everyone agrees that we have been successful, but part of what's driven some of the language terms is some of the automated translation capabilities that we are looking to implement to support all of the many translations that we are expecting, either of the full toolkit text or the registry entries.
Okay, next question. What exactly is an application profile? Who creates them?
An application profile will tell you what elements are relevant in your setting, what things are repeatable, what things are core, and how you're going to approach it. It is almost an outline from your user community to find the most relevant aspects of RDA for your situation. We do not expect individuals to create application profiles. They should be community-based, either in your region or based on the formats you work with. And if you want more, as Jamie mentioned, there will be an orientation webinar specifically on application profiles.
All right, moving on. Will there be an index?
No, there will not be an index.
All right, I wish they could all have yes or no answers like that. So when two conditions are in the same box, they are logical, and even though, I'm not sure I understand this question myself.
I
when
do.
Two conditions are in the same, oh, okay. All right, thanks, Kathy.
Yes, there is no explicit and connecting conditions in the condition box that is understood and explained in the relevant guidance chapter. Is something people are going to have to learn.
All right, I think this one's for Jamie. When is the beta toolkit going to be official and no longer beta?
I kind of talked about that at the end, and I mean, there's not a hard date right now. It's, Kathy and I were in a RDA board meeting earlier at the first part of this week, and we discussed this and what the process is to determining when the beta site is official. And one of the kind of high-level baseline that was set in that meeting was that we believe that it will be when we believe the toolkit is fit for use in training and practice. So that's an evaluation we have to make in coordination with the steering committee and with our translation partners and our policy statement partners, and feedback from the community. But we're kind of entering into a discussion now where we're trying to kind of set some parameters for that. But I did mention a few at the very end there that we expect the translations that are on the current toolkit to be done and published in the beta site before we make the switch. We expect policy statements to be significantly present in the beta site before we consider the switch. So, a time frame for that, when people push me on time frame, if you asked me this a year ago, I would have said December 2019. Right now, I'd probably say, if I had to guess, February or March 2020. But I'm guessing. We have to see how things move. There are a lot of new processes involved in all of this. Policy statement writers have to grapple with what they're really, for the first time, getting to dig in deep and start really thinking about what they want to do with this content. So, it's going to take them a little time.
All right. Will there be a crosswalk between the old and new terminology?
This is a little difficult to answer. I certainly showed some examples of how the old terminology is being mapped for navigation, either when there's a one-to-one change, such as form of work becoming category of work, that's clear in the glossary through a use for, and also how those alternate labels, such as removing earlier title proper and later title proper as elements to become just forms of title proper associated with a time span. Other changes are not being mapped. They really have to be things that we are certain that people would be looking for, where we've actually changed an element name or something like that and anticipate people would need to have the mapping elsewhere.
Right. If there are no core elements, how do we define a minimum quality record, please? That's
back to the application profile. A minimum quality record in one community is not going to have the same things as in another community. So RDA leaves that open to practitioners to collectively determine.
All right. How much of all these changes are based on feedback or requests from the library community?
It's been a mix. We based the original RDA on the IFLA functional requirements models. The fact that those were replaced by IFLA LRM, in fact, drove a lot of the changes that you see. Part of that then was library community driven because it's an IFLA standard. We also, as we continued to develop, consulted with specialists to make sure we were trying to address particular gaps that they found in the original toolkit, and we've had the feedback form open on the beta site since we made it publicly available. So I don't think I can quantify what came from where. It came from a number of different sources.
Okay. Still have a lot more questions, and just to let our audience know, I don't think we're going to get to all of these questions in the time we've got allotted, but we are through them as quickly as possible. I know I'm taking up more time by saying that. Will application profiles be provided, or will we need to create them on our own?
For something specific, we expect communities to come together and create an application profile. But as Jamie mentioned at the RDA board meeting earlier this week, we talked about having a general application profile provided in the toolkit for all users of the toolkit.
Okay. Is there a plan to have the page URLs reflect the citation numbers? Seems like that would be useful.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Sure. Is there a plan to have the page URLs reflect the citation numbers? That seems like it would be useful.
No, there's not, and it wouldn't be. Because the page URLs, there are a lot of structural process things involved in all of this for us. And the page URLs are randomized IDs, and the citation numbers need to be a little more human digestible, etc. And they're also randomized in a different way. So they're really they're two different needs, and it's not something that would work for us from a production and processing point of view.
And I should add that a page URL will have a lot of different citation numbers on it.
Yes.
Okay. And which format will be used for the examples? Sorry, that's a very general question, but not sure.
I think if you're interested in examples, I encourage you to explore the beta site. They are in a number of different formats. They've included complete examples on certain element pages with your element highlighted, but you can see how that data element relates to the whole metadata description set. So they'll be in a variety of formats, but they will not be tagged, save for MARC. They are textual examples. We do have some modeling of how a linked data visualization would look, however.
Will you be able to upload, question cut off. Will you be able to upload local policies and procedures to your view to create an interactive and local user manual?
Yes. There are several features you could use. You could use the documents, the user contributed document tool, the HTML editor I showed a little bit of, to create your own workflow type documents if you want. You can also take advantage of bookmarks or notes that can be shared locally. That means shared within your subscription, within your institution. And those notes can have, the notes are basically bookmarks with text. So those can allow you to kind of say, when you come to an option, you can have a note there that says, apply this option or don't apply it, or stuff like that. So there are several tools that can be used within the toolkit, and we'll go over those when I do a full site demo, that can be used to convey local policy practices.
Who can I contact about accessing the beta site?
Me. If you go to the beta site, if you go to rdatoolkit.org, you'll see a big button there in the left column to sign up for a free trial. We offer free 30-day trials, and if you're signed up for a free trial, you can get in the beta site or the original toolkit site. You can look at both.
Have you done usability testing on the toolkit and the phrasing of the text, to see if they end up with a catalog record that reflects what RDA implementers expect?
This was not possible to even think about until we had a stabilized text. I've now done a presentation about how you might use RDA to catalog a simple monograph after determining that there really was no such thing. And this really still won't be possible without application profiles and best practices to guide catalogers. That's the next step, and that's the important part that we still need to work on during this phase of 3R.
All right. Will Maxwell's handbook be updated for the new toolkit?
Yes. Bob will be teaching 3 of the online orientations. I talk regularly with Bob about things that are going on with this, and he is eager to master all of this himself so that he can update his book.
All right. Will fictitious characters still be established as personal names but not allowed to be used as authors of works?
This is an implementation question, and different communities may have different answers. James mentioned that there will be an entire webinar about fictitious entities, and I would encourage you to hold that question until that presentation.
Okay. Why are Boolean operators not supported?
You know, we were just having some problems with certain searches not coming up because of they use Boolean terms, but they're not meant to be used as Boolean terms. The alternative is to use phrasing to get around that, but we wanted people to just type in directly. It's you know, it's something we're experimenting with. We can turn it back on if people really feel strongly that they want Boolean operators.
All right, we actually did get to the last question on our list. Will it be possible to have hyperlinking sections in the future if it's not possible now?
Hyperlinking sections. I'm not sure
That is that's what the question says. I'm not sure who asked that, but if anyone, if they have...
I don't know if that was in reference to the ACR2 display, or...
We can wait for us to see if there's a clarification, and there's another question that's probably a yes or no. Will Ed Jones be updating RDA and serials cataloging?
Yeah, he will be. Ed is doing the aggregates and diachronic works webinar. He may be joined by another person. I haven't been able to reach that person yet and confirm that, but Ed is confirmed that he will be part of that webinar, and we're excited to have him involved.
All right. Well, we are at the end of our time. So Jamie and Kathy, we want to thank you for your presentation. Any final thoughts before we wrap?
Not from me. I thank all of you for attending.
Yes, thank you very much. I know there are a lot of changes coming your way, and there's lots of trepidations and concerns about them. And we're always happy to hear what you're thinking, and know that we are working towards. We're still working on this beta site and this toolkit, and we're working towards a better product for catalogers. Look for information about the online orientation. Should be coming out within the next couple weeks. Okay? And the
all right, thanks
follow-up
so much.
Release on May 22nd.
Yes, and when the information about the orientations comes out, we will have more information about pricing. I saw there were some questions about that as well.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. I hope everybody has a wonderful day or evening or morning, depending on where you are in the world. And we'll look forward to seeing you soon at the orientation. Thanks, everyone.